Good morning, everybody. My name's Larry Jacobs. This is Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio. It is November 16th, 2003. It's Thursday, and thanks so much for being with us today or on the archives. And, you know, we archive all our stuff. Basically, it's everywhere all over the web, anywhere you might listen to podcasts, but we archive it specifically for us over at ace-ed.org under the podcasts link. Okay, that's the home website of our American Consortium for Equity in Education. We're going to talk a little bit about that today with our guest, who I'll introduce in just a second. Go over to ace-ed.org. Everything's free over there. Our magazine, Equity and Access, our podcasts, listen to them, thousands of them are over there. Okay, and also we have our Excellence in Equity Awards. So I hope you go over, check it all out at ace-ed.org. Today, my guest is a gentleman named Pablo Munoz, who owns the MunozCompany.com, by the way, the MunozCompany.com, and where he's managing director. Obviously, he owns it, okay? But it is an educational and leadership consulting organization. And the reason I wanted to bring Pablo on is because he also wrote a wonderful book, which I have linked on site, which is called The Leader's Algorithm. Okay, it's a personal theory of action that can transform A, your life, and B, your work. Okay, it's really good stuff. And he is a great guy. We talked last week. He was superintendent for a long time in New Jersey, in Elizabeth and Passaic, New Jersey, and just an all-around good guy. And I want this book to get well known. So it's called The Leader's Algorithm. And here's the leader himself, the one, the only, Pablo Munoz. Good morning, Pablo.
Good morning, Larry. It's good to connect again and
thanks, buddy.
Get to talk to you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, and that was a nice conversation last week as we were preparing the show. I'm glad you could come on today. This is just great. Again, I want to read something which I found today as I was reading over the stuff, all right, that you had sent me, and this is from a gentleman named James Coyle, who is the president of the Gateway, which is probably near you, the Gateway Regional Chamber of Commerce, and I just love this quote. I watched in real time as Pablo Munoz transformed the Elizabeth, New Jersey school system from a failing district into a high-performing powerhouse. And this, the book, is how he did it. I could just say to you, okay, tell me how you did it, Pablo, but I won't do, oh, wait, yes, I will. How'd you do it, Pablo? Talk about that and your background.
That is long and complicated. That onion has a lot of layers to peel.
We'll start at the very beginning. I want to say this, okay? And I'm literally, I mean, you're from a Puerto Rican family. You started, all you guys, the whole family, you know, started with very little. And look at you, a Yale graduate, a Columbia graduate. Okay, superintendent of schools, you worked your way up through Elizabeth, New Jersey, and you learned a lot, and you're sharing it now. Okay, and I think that's great. All right, so I'll ask a simple question. When you say the leader's algorithm, what are you talking about? That's the name of your book. What are you talking about? It
is. It's two things, right? It's the title of the book. And it's actually an equation in the book. So as the title of the book, it's fundamentally an educational leadership book. And the reason I wrote the leader's algorithm was, in one word, help. I wrote the leader's algorithm to help aspiring, new, and current school administrators. And my vision for the book is to share what I've learned from my 30-year journey in public education, 16 years of that as a superintendent of schools. I wanted to share what I learned from my advocates and my mentors. I wanted to share what I learned from the Broad Academy. And I also wanted to share what I learned from my what I call book mentors, the books and the case studies that I read about leadership and management and teaching and learning from authors that I mostly never met. Second, I hope that aspiring new and current school administrators will read and use the book to create a leadership framework and strategy to lead and manage their schools and school districts. So that's kind of the fundamentals of the title. But to the specific question around what is the leader's algorithm, that is in chapter 1, which is called Defining the Leader's Algorithm. And the leader's algorithm is basically a simple equation that puts strategic thinking to work. You write and share your personal theory of action. Then you don't leave it as a theory. You actually execute your personal theory of action consistently with public accountability. And if you do that, then you will transform your life, work, schools, and school districts. So that when you're in chapter 1, you'll see in the call-out box and in the paragraph the definition of a leader's algorithm. And just for shorthand, it's the personal theory of action plus execution plus accountability equals transformation.
I have to ask this, and you were 16 years as superintendent, but among other things that you did. Okay, obviously you started out as a superintendent. Okay, and I want to ask you, so the world has kind of changed since the pandemic, and I know the book is pretty new. Okay, put the things you've learned. All right, and you did most of your work before the pre-pandemic. Okay. Things have changed out there. It's pretty wild out there right now in the world of public education, as you know, okay? So how does it work in today's crazy world where superintendents and principals are under such pressure, teacher retention, teacher recruitment, all that sort of thing? Just put it into today's perspective. Pablo.
Yeah, I mean, two of the big challenges that school districts have, and most of the information I get now from reading and my college students, because I'm an adjunct professor at Lehigh, and my college actually had an event last night with about 50 school officials and leaders to talk about the leader's algorithm. And yes, I mean, the one big thing that the nation is struggling with is the staffing of schools and having enough teachers. Now, a few years ago, if you had read some of the writings on it, they had predicted a need for teachers. And the one article I read was that they were projecting, just to meet the demand, 1 million new teachers. Right? And that probably had to do a lot with the baby boomers exiting the education field and the growth of the U.S. population. But at the same time, then you get smacked with a pandemic, and that causes people to rethink their lives and their careers, and then you get others exiting sooner than they would have, and I was one of them. I retired. I retired in 2021 from the superintendency in public administration and began my consulting company. But I was smack in COVID. I mean, I remember the news stories coming out in 2019, early 2020, and then the whole state and the nation shutting down, and then back and forth for months about whether we would go back to school and how we would operate. And every day when we were actually open, we were writing letters and such. I think it played out differently for different communities and their contexts.
Agreed.
For me, what I found, first of all, I think, and I guess those that love technology may disagree with me, but I think the panacea that technology would solve all of education's problems was debunked by COVID. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better test case, right? All of a sudden, everybody was sent home, and the only way to educate a child was online with programs or Zoom or whatever your platform was. And I think people, or at least I feel, I don't know that all feel this way, but I think people have come to realize that students in schools with teachers in the classroom is a must. It's a must, right? Not only for the education of children, not only for the education of the children, but what we saw economically, right, that public schools pre-K to 12 serve a vital interest in not only educating kids, but for getting parents to go to work and having the economy work, right? Because if parents
feeding the
home,
kids. Let me put that thing in there too. Feeding the kids.
Yeah, there's a whole element of those levels, and but what you quickly find out, right? Because the pandemic really highlights it, is that in my case, I ran 2 urban school districts. 86 and 88% poverty rates, large numbers of English language learners.
Mm-hmm.
I had preschool students, 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. What you quickly learn is that 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, kindergartners, first graders, second graders, special needs students need to be in schools with teachers. And in certain cases, they're instructional aides, right, at that age level, because not only is their curriculum academic, but it's also social and socialization.
Yes, it is.
And the children at that age lost a lot of that interaction with their peers because they were home for months, or maybe even up to a year. And then preschoolers, right? And kindergartners that are going through different stations and playing and learning and all that. I mean, how do you execute that on your mom's lap?
Yeah, you don't, or you don't do it well.
Teacher,
let's put it that way.
Talk to your teacher on an iPhone, right? And then the kids' eyes are glazed over trying to, not those, even the older kids, right? The older kids that actually could do content because they can self-navigate academic platforms, software platforms that taught instruction, and they can pace themselves. I mean, 6 hours, your eyes glaze over and are spinning. You're getting vertigo by the end of the day. So I think this whole craze about technology being a panacea, I think, was debunked. I think probably Jim Collins gets a great. That technology is an accelerator, right? It's not the main driver of improving academic outcomes for kids. It's important, and it will change how instruction gets delivered. And,
yes, it will.
There's a lot of good stuff out there that helps kids. But the importance of being in schools with your peers, socializing, influencing each other, and in my case, the bilingual, multilingual kids needing to be out of the home, interacting with English speakers, the instruction, and their peers is crucially important. I think those were kind of some of the big takeaways for me as I was exiting the superintendency. And what I think is happening now is that so what I'm hearing, right, and I think there'll be some time before you actually be able to dive into the data and see how it plays out. But COVID really had a large impact on student learning, and
it's incredible. That a negative one.
So I think schools are dealing with that. Like if they were supposed to be at a certain grade level, they may be further back than usual because of the missed time in schools with professional teachers and not having to deal. Like in my case, right, we had to pivot real quickly, and it wasn't until we got federal funding for the start of the next school year that we were able to build up. But, in my environment, I had kids, even if we were able to get them laptops because they're poor and they didn't have computers at home.
They need broadband. It'd be nice to have broadband.
They didn't have Wi-Fi connection.
Exactly.
And
that's what I meant. Wi-Fi.
You don't even think this through, but you get this feedback from the different parents communicating, right? Because I'm layers removed from the interaction between teachers and students. But a lot of parents' Wi-Fi's in my context were their phones. Yeah. And they just lost their job, so they couldn't pay for their phone. So now,
Exactly.
now their Wi-Fi is down because their phone is down. So we actually ended up having, even though we wanted to pivot and go online with a lot of stuff, we actually had to print and produce a lot of the content that we would have done online. Now, and then we had to set up
get it to the kids and get it to the kids. Yeah.
Wow. They had to come and get online and pick up their stuff. Where COVID, everybody has their mask. And the second thing that was happening was that we feed breakfast and lunch. So now these communities don't have meals, right? So we had to set up systems all day long for parents, all week long, for parents to pick up meals, breakfast and lunch, because that's where they were getting them. So not only were we dealing with instruction, not only were we dealing with social emotion, but we were dealing with a whole food distribution process in our schools.
But you guys made it through. And one of the reasons Elizabeth, are you talking about Elizabeth or Passaic right then? It doesn't really matter, but which one are you talking about?
That experience was my second superintendency. So COVID happened.
That's in Passaic. Yeah, okay. New Jersey, by the way, for those of you who don't know where that is. Okay, excuse me. So you guys made it through. But what helped you make it through was all the things you did in the years prior. And you started that in Elizabeth, I hope, in New Jersey, and I hope they made it through too. I think they did. Okay? But then it was Passaic's turn. And you took all the things that you learned from Elizabeth, New Jersey, put it into Passaic, changed what you needed to change to make it fit that district. The damn pandemic hit, and they made it through. Okay? And you did that. And think about it, okay? Think about it. There was something there to begin with, okay? So I want to ask you, as you moved Elizabeth, and I'm sure you moved Passaic as well forward, okay? They were failing urban districts, if I may, and I don't mean to be derogatory to either one of them. Wonderful teachers, wonderful community, okay? But they were not doing well, and under your leadership, okay, they did do well. They did better. They started to understand how important all this is. Okay, and talk about how your leadership, what did you implement, all right, that allowed them to have the confidence to get through all this?
Right.
And that's what superintendents need to know. They need to set up the systems that work. Okay, they can't teach every kid. They can't do that. They can't discipline every kid. They can't do that. They need to set up the larger systems. The logistics of it, if I may. Talk about it, Pablo. That's what's going on these days. Yeah.
Well, listen, that's a fantastic question, and quite frankly,
thank you.
Frank, if one were to pick up my book and read the book, they would get the full story laid out. Right?
I have it linked. It's on site.
Not only do I define the leader's algorithm and define what a personal theory of action is, and then I go on to teach leadership lessons and unfold of how I approach my leadership. But let me start just fundamentally with how I led, right? And I led by writing a personal theory of action, right? And that's the heart and soul of the book. The book goes on to teach a lot of leadership lessons through personal and professional stories. But it was about creating a personal theory of action. So what is a personal theory of action, right? It's a written leadership framework. A personal theory of action is what you can do personally and through your team to achieve your goals. It's written in a logical if-then statement that leads to your ultimate goal. And usually your ultimate goal is your mission statement, or you're paraphrasing your mission statement. So said another way, if we do A, B, and C, then we will get X, Y, and Z results. And my personal theory of action was the leadership framework that I used to lead and manage the Elizabeth and the Passaic public schools. So let me give you, and this will kind of lay out for the listeners how I went about leading, because otherwise we'd probably spend 2 weeks just discussing all the ins and outs of how I went about it, right? Because it didn't happen overnight. In Elizabeth, I was there 8.5 years as superintendent. In Passaic, I was there 7.5 years. So this stuff is happening, right? It's happening over time. It doesn't happen overnight. But if and when you pick up the book, in Appendix A, I give the full personal theory of action for both Elizabeth and Passaic, the last two that I use as my leadership framework in those schools. So you can read exactly how I wrote them. And they're not written in stone, so they evolve over time as you learn more and as you have wins and losses and as people help you teach you things and say things to you. But my personal theory of action was structured as an if-then statement. I had 4 if statements. The first one was how I would lead. The second if statement was how I would select leaders and what I expected of them as leaders. The third if statement was the larger district objectives, right? And the fourth if statement were the guiding principles for the school district. So that all led up to the then statement, which is the ultimate goal. So let me give you a taste of what I did. And this is from the Passaic personal theory of action. So my first if statement is this: if I lead with a focus on these 3 things. So these are there's an enormous amount of noise, an enormous amount of stuff you can focus in on, right? But I chose that for me as a leader that I would consistently focus on these 3 things, right? First thing was to keep the school system focused on its vision and its mission in an effort to produce excellent results. The second thing was to select effective leaders to carry out the mission. And the third thing, quite frankly, probably the most important thing, was to get the resources into the classroom, right? And if anybody knows urban ed, the battle for money, right, initially from the state or the local level is a challenge.
Everywhere.
But once you have the money, you have to build a budget. You are dealing with your board and your unions, and they all want the money to go to certain places. And I needed to keep the organization focused to get the vast majority of it into the classrooms. And what do I mean by that, right? The personnel, the teachers, the aides, right? The money gets converted into people. It gets converted into programs and instructional materials. It gets converted into services for the children. And I needed to make sure and stay focused that the resources that we receive, whether from the state, the federal, or the local, or from grants, that was hitting and getting to the kids in the vast majority of the time. So when I used to do budget presentations, I used to show over 80% of the district resources getting into the classrooms. And I would battle with my board about it, right? Because, if they wanted to hire 10 more custodians, but I needed a new instructional program, what's the priority here, guys? It's the instructional program. Then I would focus in my next level of if was on the leaders that I selected and what I wanted them to do, right? And I would have them focus on 6 things: vision, mission, the instructional core, teamwork, trust, and high expectation. And I'll tell you, and I'll tell your listeners, I used to do what I used to call a final interview. So as a superintendent, I would have to recommend to the board an appointment of an administrator or a promotion of an administrator. And before that, I would bring the candidate into my office, and I would sit down with them and say, hey, listen, this is going to be your final interview. I said, listen, this is going to be a very odd interview. I don't think you've ever had one like this before. And I said, but bear with me. Just humor me, go through it. I will explain to you why we do this. So I would then tell them we're going to do a word association game here. And I said, I'm going to give you 6 words or 6 combination of words, and I want you to react to these words. I want you to tell me what comes to your mind. 1 word, 1 sentence, a few sentences. Don't go too long on them because I eventually want to get to why we're doing this. And I would say vision and they would react. And I say mission and they would react. I would say instructional core and they would react. And then once we got through all of them, teamwork, trust, and high expectations, I would tell them 2 things. All right. I said, first of all, the reason we did that is I wanted to create a memorable moment for you. I wanted you to leave this room saying that was the oddest interview I've ever had, right? And I want you to remember that experience, and I want you to remember these 6 words and these 6 groups of words, because these are my talking points to you, right? Then I would launch into what I expected of them from vision, mission, instructional core, teamwork, trust, high expectations, right? I would lay out my expectations of them. And throughout the existence of the superintendency, I would be consistently writing, talking, and most importantly, acting on vision and mission. I would write about it, talk about it until they gagged on it. I needed them to stay focused on the vision and the mission. The third.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah, we got about 7 minutes left, so go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so the third, this really sums up how I went about it, right? The third if statement was that I would move the district to an aligned instructional system. So the third if statement had 7 sentences and clauses. This third if statement was the organizational theory of action. And what I did was write a policy that played out all these 7 things, right? And I'll give you shorthand: curriculum, effective teachers and leaders, professional development, formative and summative assessments, comprehensive student information system, interventions, and measuring performance, growth, and progress. Those were the 7, and I just gave you shorthand. I didn't read you the whole sentence. But in the policy, they would be
They can buy the book. Don't worry about it. That's the point.
Right?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Right? And I would get the board to adopt a policy saying, listen, Mr. Superintendent, this is the board's direction to management that I want you to execute this district. I want you to act on these 7 variables and create the district around them. Now, I wrote them. I convinced them to adopt it, and therefore now I have strength and power, because now when I tell the organization that this is what we're going to do, and they go, well, is your idea? No, it's board policy. But I got the board to adopt it, and I convinced them that it was necessary. But it's part of my personal theory of action. So not only is it board policy, but it's also part of mine. And then I got to say something, Pablo. I got to interrupt for a second. I didn't mention this before, but I know you went to Yale, and I know you graduated with am I right, a psychology degree? Yeah, my degree in psychology. And I got to tell you, that's good psychology work and what you did. Okay, that is classic. I got to tell you, we got to go, but I got everything linked here. Okay, and Pablo is available not only to talk to you but work with you, et cetera, et cetera. I'm so glad you're here, my friend, and thank you so much. And best of luck with the book. It's wonderful. Yes, thank you, Larry. You're welcome, Pablo. Come back on. Anytime. You're always welcome. Stay in touch. I'd love to come back on. Come back on. Get another. Yeah, let me know whenever. I'll come back and we'll keep on chatting. Good enough. Yes, thanks, Pablo. Okay, I'll talk to you soon. All right, take care. Bye-bye. All right, bye-bye. Bye. The amazing Pablo Munoz, the Leaders Algorithm. It's all linked over here. We'll archive at ace-ed.org. I'm Larry Jacobs. Thanks so much for listening.